Spider-Man Noir is definitely one of my favorite characters from the Spider-Verse movies, and I think he deserves a closer look in this video. Let's dive into his backstory and take a better look at what makes him so interesting. So, his real name is Peter Parker, but because he's known as Spider-Man Noir, I'm gonna stick with calling him that. His story kicks off in the 1930s, which to be honest, was not the best time to be born. It was during the dark days of the Great Depression, a time when the world was struggling and life was tough for most people. His childhood was rough right from the start. He became an orphan at a very young age. In a way, his story is similar to the classic Peter Parker we all know. He was raised by his Aunt May and Uncle Ben, just like the traditional version of Peter. But as with almost every Spider-Man origin story, tragedy strikes, and Uncle Ben dies. That loss hits him hard, and it shapes his entire worldview. It's that grief that sets him on the path to becoming Spider-Man and fighting against injustice. Instead of being bitten by a radioactive spider, he gets his powers from a mystical spider. This magical bite gives him superhuman strength, incredible durability, and the ability to cling to walls. With these powers, along with his sharp mind, Spider-Man Noir is ready to take on whatever comes his way. But in his world, he's not just a superhero, he's also a private investigator. He mixes his physical abilities with his detective skills, tackling cases that are beyond the usual crime. The villains he faces are nothing like the ones in a typical Spider-Man story. Instead of just regular bad guys, Spider-Man Noir is up against Nazis and other sinister forces that threaten to tear apart the already dark and messed up world he lives in.
I like to drink egg creams, and I like to fight Nazis. A lot.
His enemies are as dangerous and twisted as the world around him, making his job even more complicated. Now speaking of his world, it's not your usual bright and colorful setting. His universe is painted in shades of black and white, which really fits the gritty, hard-hitting atmosphere of his story. This lack of color isn't just an aesthetic choice, it reflects his personality, which is deeply somber and serious. Unlike the cheerful and hopeful Peter Parker we know, Spider-Man Noir's life is filled with constant violence and darkness. To cope with it all, he shuts off his emotions. He refuses to let himself feel vulnerable, focusing only on his mission and pushing away anything that might distract him from the fight. He has this strange habit of lighting a match and letting it burn to his fingertips, just to see if he can feel something.
Sometimes I let matches burn down to my fingertips just to feel something, anything. Oh.
His life took a huge turn when he was pulled from his dark black and white universe and brought into an entirely different one, where he met other spider people from different dimensions. These other spider people, with their vibrant personalities and unique qualities, brought a sense of light and camaraderie that Spider-Man Noir hadn't experienced in years. For someone who was used to being alone and keeping his emotions locked down, this was a big change. There's a scene where the spider people kind of test Miles to see if he's ready to take on the mission of stopping the collider. They put him through a series of tests to see if he has what it takes to be part of the team. When Miles fails to meet their expectations, they gather to talk it over. And as they're having this discussion, Spider-Man Noir walks up to join the group. As he does, he gives a subtle gesture to Miles, kind of saying that he doesn't want to make part of the discussion. Another telling moment happens when Miles discovers that his Uncle Aaron is the Prowler. Spider-Man Noir's reaction is a great example of his dry, dark sense of humor. Instead of showing shock or sympathy, he simply says, "That's a pretty hardcore origin story."
Hey, where have you been?
My Uncle Aaron, he's the Prowler.
Slow down.
He works for Kingpin. He tried to kill me.
This is a pretty hardcore origin story.
It's okay. It's okay.
His comment is blunt and to the point, which is typical for him, but it also shows that he's not fazed by the crazy revelations around him. In the final battle, he really shows what he's made of. He takes down Tombstone using a mix of raw strength and smart strategy. And let's just say, he doesn't hold back at all. He goes all in, which is quite different from most Spider-Men who usually hold back when fighting their enemies. But beyond just his fighting skills, what stands out about Spider-Man Noir is his support for his friends. A great example of this is when he shows concern for Penny after her spider suit gets destroyed. Even though his world is so dark and filled with violence, he's there for his teammates, offering help and encouragement in the way he knows best. As everyone gets ready to return to their own dimensions, he delivers one of the most heartfelt moments in the movie. He tells his new friends, in a simple but genuine way, that he loves them.
I, love you all.
This moment is huge because it shows a side of him we don't often see, his vulnerability. For a character who's so used to shutting off his emotions and focusing only on his mission, telling people he loves them is a big deal. It's a reminder of how much the Spider Gang has impacted his life and how, despite the dark world he comes from, he's starting to let those connections in. He even brings a Rubik's Cube with him, even though he has no idea what the colors are called. It's a funny and endearing moment because you can see him trying to figure it out, even though he's not really the kind of guy who worries about things like this. The fact that he has the Rubik's Cube with him speaks to how he's starting to embrace a little more color and complexity in his life, things that go beyond just the darkness of his universe. When he returns to his own dimension, you can tell that the impact of his experience with the Spider People still lingers. Even though he's back to his gritty black and white world, he is different now. His time with the gang has opened him up to new emotions, and he's holding onto those lessons and friendships. Plus, he's not done helping out his friends. At the end of Across the Spider-Verse, we see him as part of Gwen's team to rescue Miles. I can't wait to see his role in the next movie, and I'm really looking forward to how his interaction with Spider-Punk will be.